Well, please join me in welcoming Jim as our next speaker this morning.
Thank you, guys. By the way, if anybody wants to become a minister of a wedding, it's about 5 minutes and $50. It's not a big deal. It's a 1-year license. You want a lifetime license? It's $100. That's it. So I want to talk about marketing questions that I've been pondering, thinking about over the last couple years. I spent a lot of time in omnichannel and multi-channel, and I'm in a different space now, but similar. So these are things that came to my mind over time, that some of which you actually heard already mentioned, and I just want to challenge a little bit of the thinking on it, and just make it, my goal in this session is to get you guys to think a little bit differently about something that you may not have thought about before in any detail. If we do that, I've had a good day. There's something called the baby elephant syndrome. Anybody heard of this? Does anybody know what that is? Good, not many, that's good. If everybody raised their hand, it'd be much shorter. So when elephants are little and they're in the zoo, they tether them to a little stake in the ground with a rope or a chain or something, and the elephants don't move when they're little. When they get bigger, they still don't move, even though they could. But things they've learned early on are so ingrained in their mind that it's very difficult for them to change. That's kind of the metaphor of what I'm going to talk about. So think about things that you may have learned early on or even recently that you've just sort of been tethered to, but that actually you can break away from and be free. So I'm going to talk about 3 main questions, and then there's a couple sub-questions. So there's actually more than 3, but 3 to get things started. How can data from the past be used to make decisions about the future is the first question. And I like to read a lot about business and marketing and so on. And one of the guys I really like is Roger Martin, who is the former dean of business at the University of Toronto, Rotman School of Business. And he talks about most of the time, he said the overwhelming majority of the time, the future of business is very different than the past of business. So when you're looking at an analysis of something, whatever it is, it's almost guaranteed to be different in the future. So when we talk about looking at data and analytics, you have to keep that in mind, that there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be changing, and it doesn't go uniformly from past to future. There's an old Greek philosopher, a guy named Heraclitus, who said, you can never step into the same river twice. So once you step into the river, it changes. Everything is like that. Everything in your life is like that. Once you do something once, you can never go to your first baseball game again. It's different. Everything's different. So if you get that mindset that things are changing, you look at analytics very differently. So pondering, thinking about this, what does data-driven decision-making actually mean? Because we hear that all the time. We're data-driven decision marketers. Okay, I'm not saying, and I'm not saying you don't use data at all. I'm just saying that's not the only thing you use. So when you look at data and how you analyze decision-making, I came up with these 3 things to talk about to kind of support what I'm saying. First, Gawande list, which I'll talk about in a second. Fallacy of averages and benchmarks inviting average. So what's the Gawande list? There's a book by a surgeon, and I think he's a media guy too, Atul Gawande, brilliant guy. It's a great book. It's called The Checklist Manifesto. And it's about professionals like surgeons and pilots and lawyers and everything, where they plan this checklist of how they do their jobs. Fortunately for us, right? When you get in a plane, you want to know the pilot has this checklist of all these things that need to be in place. Well, I kind of adopted it to marketing and how we look at analytics. And this is just an example of the list of variables that we consider in an analysis. They change over time, but you say, okay, I'm looking at the past, and I work in primarily HCP marketing for vaccines. So the account is a big deal. The type of account, whether it's a health system or an independent, the size of the account, mix of the channels we're using, is it a branded and unbranded split of messaging, all these variables that lead you to whatever the outcome of the analysis is. The key is, now you're looking at the future, are all of those variables staying the same or are they changing? Not to mention external variables. Competitor has a new product coming out. Competitor just lowered their price. There's a recession coming. Who knows what it could, but competitor just doubled their sales force. All these factors. We just reduced our sales force, whatever. There's a whole bunch of things that go into play that you have to add to that mix. And I used to talk to our model analytics people, the ones who created the market mix models, and said, all right, you're giving me the model of what's based on the past. How do we factor in usually like better creative, or what we think is going to be better? Is that a 10% bump? How do we look at that? Not to mention all these other variables. So data-driven decision-making is not just about the past, it's about where you're going in the future. Okay, fallacy of averages. This won't be surprising to anybody when you look at averages. This is the kind of, it's an example of it's made up data, but the kind of stuff we might look at. You have 8 different groups here. Rep, face-to-face, trigger, digital, they get yes or no in each of these. Number of HCPs, and this happened to be a insurance claims metric. So when you look at that, you look at the average number of claims, kind of makes sense. Except when presented with this information, I questioned the team and said, are you including the HCPs who have 0 claims? How many of them are there? So we decided then we're going to stratify the data and look at it differently, right? And say, okay, there's, on that group in the top, the no-no-nos, right? No, they're not getting any promotion. 40,000 have no claims out of 60. Kind of makes sense. But the real key to that group is the 200 on the far right. The thing about analytics that you learn is it's always about the outliers, right? Those ones that how are these 200 different than everybody else? What can I learn from that? And then on the other end, down at the bottom, the yes, yes, yeses, there's 6,000, 20% of that audience had no claims. How come? All the other ones are showing a lot more activity. What can I learn from them? So it's not about an average where you might say, oh, we'll spend more because our average is 23.9 versus 16.7. Oh, okay, that's all good math, and that might, I don't know if it'll get you more budget or not, but like it's not complete look at the picture. So the more you convince or work with the analytics team and convince them to look at the outliers, I think the better insights you get into customer behavior. Because we all talk about how do we get insights that aren't just observations. I think you look at the outliers to do it. The other thing about averages, if this lady walked into the room right now, our average net worth would be a lot higher. So that's the fallacy of averages. Okay. The last part of data-driven is benchmarks. And a lot of times you'll hear, I got 10% open rate on an email. Well, what's the benchmark? Benchmark is 4%. We're doing great, whatever. It's like, when you aim for the benchmark, you aim for average. Now, this is a guy named Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's kind of right-hand man. They were investors for years. He recently passed away at the age, I think, of 99. Brilliant guy. If you ever get a chance to read anything about Charlie Munger, it's worth it. So he's the one that said, mimicking the herd invites regression to the mean, dumbing down everything, basically. So when you think about benchmarks, you think about average. I'm sure nobody here would want to be average, right? You're not going to aspire to be average. But that's what a benchmark is. I prefer to think, I need this amount of customer behavior to change to make this program a success. If that happens, then we're successful. I don't care what the benchmarks are. This is the goal that we have. So it's not just semantics. I think it's a mindset that says we're trying to achieve something that will deliver more for the organization. I also think that's how you get more budget. Okay. Also in the analytics phase, how precise does my measurement really need to be? This is about a time period. And when you look at, precision of measurement, I've always had the view I would trade precision for speed, I think. Sometimes it works. A lot of this is, why is the answer to every analytics question? It all depends, because it all depends on these variables and all these situations. So how long does it take to get precise measures? We've done a lot of 3 months pre, 3 months post behavior. There's a data lag. By the time you get the answer, it might be 6 months after the campaign started. The longer it takes, the more likely other factors get involved. You go from seasonality. Not even if you're a seasonal product, but you do better in the spring than you do in the fall. Now all of a sudden the campaign's running a lot longer. It's changing the effect. There's increased risk of things going wrong or affecting the results. The other thing that happens as you get in a truly omnichannel world where you get the sales force involved, you have a test and control group. And you say, okay, each group now they're going to be seeing the doctors once a month. But that could change over time. For maybe one group is now skewed a little bit differently. That changes the results, because if the control group is seeing the physician more often than the test group, the test is going to fail, most likely, if you don't know it, if you're not paying attention. So the longer things go, the more likely those factors come into play. And then what decision do I need to make from this analysis? Most of the time, a business analysis doesn't need to be super precise. 4 to 1 ROI, 3.8 to 1 ROI. It's the same decision. If you're compensating people on bonuses, it's different, but we're not usually doing that in a marketing role. Okay, second question. Are personalization and modular content worth the effort? We've heard a little bit of both of them mentioned already today. I always look at that, and my view is, if you look at them in isolation, they're fine, they're great. But we don't work in isolation. We work with a lot of priorities, with a lot of jobs to get done, and you can't look at it that way. You have to look at it as a trade-off. If I'm gonna spend time on one of these, what am I not gonna spend time on? So if I look at personalization, my view, strictly my view, I hope you guys get to think about this, and feel free to disagree, because that's okay. Top of the funnel is a standardized message for everybody. That's the, brand efficacy, brand, safety, all those kind of clinical things. That's the top of the funnel. People are just starting to get interested in the brand. Middle of the funnel, they're showing a little bit more interest. So in a pediatric vaccine world, middle of the funnel might be pediatricians versus primary care doctors. Pediatricians get their kind of message, primary care get theirs. They're customized, they're not personalized. I don't need to personalize them. All pediatricians with regard to pediatric vaccines behave basically the same. So is it worth the effort to drill deep into be more personalized for something that I believe will give little gain but take a lot of time? All of these things take a lot of time and a lot of effort. If you've been in pharma for a while, you know one thing's for sure. Projects will take longer than you think and involve more people than you think. And that's just, no matter how simple you try to make it. Finally, when you get to the bottom of the funnel, where the sales rep's involved, that is where the personalization comes in. Because the rep knows the customer better than data ever will. Right? Know how to talk to the customer. I know what they like, what they don't like. I know how to schmooze them a little bit if I need to, talk about the game last night, or they're not interested in that, I need to go right down to business. I know all that stuff because I talk to these people all the time. Okay, modular content. Another one that gets talked about a lot. And I look at it and say, at least for us, and I won't speak of anybody else, we seem to use it on the least impactful channels, which to me, and I'm not saying these aren't important channels, banner ads, email. For us, those are reminder channels, not base information channels. So we're gonna go through a lot of effort to create 15 different paragraphs that we're gonna mix and match to put in this email for this customer, of which 90-some% are not even gonna look at, ever. So how much time and effort do you go through that? And who knows? Who's the person who knows to say, for this customer, paragraph 1, 7, and 10, for this customer, paragraph 2, 4, 6. Who knows that for sure? It's really hard to test that too. So is the impact worth the effort? Is it greater than the effort? I think it's a challenge. And I think if you look at it like, yes, if I want to make sure that it is worth the effort and that the team is better off spending time doing that than something else, what is that something else that they're going to give up? Because sometimes the argument is whatever else that they're doing is actually more valuable to the business than modular content. But modular content sounds great. Who can argue with it? The last part of this is how significant are changes in content. What we've done, and this may be just strictly our fault, is the content isn't all that different. It's tweaked. It's a little bit of difference here or there. Is that enough to generate a significant enough response to justify the time spent? So it's not about, is modular content good or bad? I think there's a benefit to it. But if the benefit is 1 and the time spent is 10, it's hard to manage that. So that's the point. The other one that I hear a lot of, you got to get the right customer, the right message, the right time, the right channel, right. I hear people talk about that a lot. I don't see a lot of studies that say this actually works. So same thing, it sounds logical. Who could argue with it? Except when you think about it, I looked at the rights and said, we should, at least in the HCP marketing world, we should know the right customer. I mean, we have tons of data on physicians. We have models that predict, okay, we're probably pretty good at knowing who the right customer is. The right message? I don't know. And I mean, is the brand, the benefit of the brand, the right message at this time? I have no idea. I'm not sure that I can figure that out. The right channel? So I'm a believer, let me rephrase it. I'm an anti-believer, I'm non-believer in channel preference. I don't believe any of us have a channel preference. We respond to whatever channel we get. I don't think, so what that formula means, if A and B are channels, having A and B in market is better than having double A or double B, regardless of what they are. We've tested a bunch of that. Every time you add channels, you get better response. Because nobody's just strictly looking at email. If I don't get an email on this, I don't look at it. There's a lot of channels out there. The more different ways you can come to a customer with a message, the better the response is going to be. So right channel is out. Now right time, anybody know the 95-5 rule? Okay. So there was a study done by LinkedIn Business to Business Institute where they found that 95% of the time customers are not in a frame of mind to buy, no matter what product it is and when you're, so almost guaranteed, whatever your message going out today, the customer's not ready to buy. So how do I know what the right time is? I have an answer to that in a second, but like you don't know. So you can't say, oh, I got all the rights in alignment and I've got this figured out, because you don't. Nobody does. So why think that way? Instead, I'll look at like the long and the short, it's called, but if you have not read any stuff by these guys, Les Binet and Peter Fields, it's Binet, not Binet. We want to say Binet, but it's not, it's Binet. These are marketing effectiveness guys from the UK. Done a lot of great work on what they call the long and the short. So the long is brand building type messaging, what we might call mass media, versus the short targeted performance type media. So you need a mix. Their rule of thumb is basically a 60-40 mix of long and short, but like all of the stuff, it all depends. It's not a guarantee, but you need both. The way that works is the long message is always out there. So think of buying a car. I don't know why I always go to Toyota RAV4, but I just do. So it's like Toyota RAV4 messaging is out there all the time. You probably see TV commercials on it all the time. Doesn't factor into your mind at all if you're not interested in the car. When you do look at a car, now you see you're paying attention, because they've also been running the short-term Memorial Day, $400 off the down payment, whatever, all those special offers. Now you're paying attention. But subtly, over time, you've seen all these great brand messaging that you're not paying attention to because you're not in the market. The performance messages have to be there too, because I don't know when you're in the market, but I know when you are, you've got to refer back in the back of your mind to this brand. I think that's the way you look at these things, and not looking at right. Because you can't accomplish it. You can accomplish this. You can't accomplish right. The third question, why is efficiency prioritized? And I think this is a subtle question. Nobody, when we talk in meetings about efficiency, that's same thing. Everybody agrees with efficiency. But I think effectiveness is a lot more important. Yet, efficiency is prioritized in marketing decisions, or seems to be, because the first thing you look at is what's the cost per whatever. If I can lower the cost per whatever, click, lead, whatever, I'm doing well. But you can do that and go out of business, right? It's about generating business first, top line business. So there's a guy, Peter Drucker, who wrote a book called The Effective Executive 50-some years ago. And it's one of my favorite quotes because it applies to a lot of things. Nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. So think about that, first of all, in prioritizing your work, your business. Are you getting more efficient at doing things that maybe you shouldn't even be doing? But think about it from a marketing standpoint. So you're getting really efficient at running ads on a certain site that you're spending all this time to get more. You're going to negotiate deals, you're going to do all this, and then you find out it's not really worth it anyway. Why am I spending all this time? Meanwhile, we're not effective. We're not driving any business. So when I look at effectiveness versus efficiency, there's a couple factors to think about. If you drive effectiveness, gains in effectiveness, in a pharmaceutical brand, in most pharmaceutical brands, you're driving millions, tens, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars of change. If you're driving reductions in efficiency, probably reducing hundreds of thousands, maybe a few millions in spend. The scales aren't even close most of the time. So if I just spend time on something and working with the agencies, I want the agency to be driving effectiveness. How can we make this more effective? How can I get everybody in this target market to know this brand and this message? by Memorial Day. How can I do that? I don't care what it costs because the benefits are going to be there. I'll worry about efficiency later, after effectiveness. But if you start with efficiency, I don't believe you can get effectiveness later. I don't know, maybe you can. I think it's really difficult. So I think effectiveness is really hard. Efficiency is kind of easier once you get there. Effectiveness is a long-term gain. Once you figure out the way to be effective in communicating to the market, it doesn't go away. Effectiveness is short. If you're spending $100 on this ad and now you take it down to 80, you can't take it down from 100 to 80 again. Now you got to go lower. And what are you giving up when you do that? So there's a short-term benefit to that, which is fine. But that's like, to me, that's like the condiments on the meal. But the meal is effectiveness. Another one, I heard, I think Ryan may have mentioned this, or failing fast. I don't know. That's another one that, did you mention that, Ryan? Failing fast? No. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you out the door. But somebody said failing fast. Okay. Failing fast. Is it a good idea? We talk about it a lot. We're going to fail fast. Well, I think there's a risk in failing fast. It depends. Obviously, it all depends. What are you trying to do? But if you're trying to change behavior and influence behavior, you can make fast decisions that turn out to be wrong. So our example, because we did this, we reduced spend. Efficiency play. We're going to reduce spend for a customer segment. Let's see what happens. Initially, nothing happened. So it was like, this is great. We've been able to reduce spend to this customer segment, reinvest it somewhere else, and it was actually a good customer segment, and nothing happened until it does, because it takes longer. So what happens is, over time, the impact of advertising starts to show, or lack of advertising. So after 3 months, we said, no, let's reinvest it. Month 4, now we start to see sales declining. So is that failing fast, or is that just failing dumb because you reacted too quickly? So it's not about fast. It's about understanding going into a plan, when am I making this decision? When do I feel confident that I have the data? Because remember, in the beginning of this talk, I talked about waiting too long to make a decision. Now I'm talking about making a decision too short. It's like Goldilocks. Well, what's the answer? The answer is in the middle. You've got to think that through in advance and say, all right, if I go too fast and I'm wrong, there's consequences, especially when you're messing around with best customer segments. So you say, okay, I can't do it too